Okay, this is basically part 4 of the coming Civil War. I will be creating a playlist which will include the martial law videos and coming Civil War videos, because I figure they pretty much are kind of a series if you think about it. So, first I probably should do that shameless plug because I keep getting told this. Patreon channel, you see the address up at the top. If you like what I do, come on over there. I post my videos over there for free. You can watch them there, and I try to post other videos that I come across for training. I try to get to it every other day. This last couple weeks I haven't been able to because we've had different stuff going on in the militia over the last couple weeks here, not training wise and stuff, just accountability and things like that. Plus I'm working with getting in new people and stuff with my unit. So I've been rather busy. That's why stuff kind of fell off over on Patreon. Sorry about that. And then also dealing with medical issues too, of trying to get cleared to go back to work and stuff. So nothing serious. I'm still alive. I won't be dying anytime real soon. But the topic for today's video: we must stay these United States of America. Now, a little thread that I've noticed in a lot of these videos on the coming Civil War, the Second Civil War, Second Revolution that are coming out right now. Everyone seems to take it that we will be divided at the end of it, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way it should be. No, it's not. Now, for those of you that do not know your history, which unfortunately because of our education system, that's pretty much everyone. When the revolution happened, we were not a united front. We were not a united country. Each colony essentially fought on their own. Each colony was its own nation. Each colony raised its own military forces. Some of those forces went to serve in the Continental Army. Most of those forces were state militia or local militia. Now, at the end of the war, each of those 13 individual countries wanted to become a nation, but they were still their own individual little nations. They were still the individual colonies. There was really nothing binding them together. It took the Constitution to do that. The war itself did not bind the country. It just showed people that they wanted freedom. The purpose of the war was not to start a new nation. Contrary to what Hollywood tells you, that's not what the purpose was. It was to bring a birth of freedom in the former colonies. What brought us together was the Constitution. And the Constitution was not created overnight. It took years of bickering back and forth for it to happen. Now, after that, this is another thing not taught in history, they referred to themselves as these United States of America, not the United States of America or the United States of America. That changed in the 20th century. In the 20th century, they eliminated that. They wanted us to think of ourselves as just the one element. Where the founders in early America, up until the late 1800s, early 1900s, they still referred to themselves as these United States. They recognized that each state was its own entity, but we came together as a nation. That's something we need to get back to. We need to think about that. We need to accept that each state, each region has its differences, and always will. But we try to put those differences aside and create something better. That's what the United States was. These United States were. Now, in the 20th century, we had communists and socialists went hardcore in government. And I think really the big change on it from these to the happened, I believe, around World War II. So the time when you had a socialist in the White House, and yes, FDR was a Fabian socialist. So was Churchill. And I'm sure people are going to raise a stink about that in the comments, but actually look it up, people. They were socialists, all right? Look at their policies, what they were doing and such. They were socialists. They did that to get the idea into people's mind that it's not the state governments that had the most power, it's the federal government that had the most power. The federal government was God over all, and the states do what the federal government says. Where before that it was the federal government was supposed to do what the state said. The federal government would create the laws that bound it all together, took these different little elements, came up with that agreement between them, and codified it that, okay, this is how it's going to be thing. So, now at the end of this upcoming civil war, which will occur regardless of what we say, what we do, it's going to happen, and it has to happen. We're just at that point that it has to occur. The drive will be to break apart. As some people have said, you know, you have your communist nations in California and New York, you have your, you could say, neo-confederacies down in the south, you have your independent territories, independent states all over the place, and you'll have states that'll break up into their own independent countries and all that. We can't allow that, and the reason we can't allow that is if we're divided, we're easier to conquer. Now, we will defeat the enemy on the battlefield in this coming war. That's a given. It will occur. It will take a long time, but in the end, we will win. But they will be back, and if we're divided, we're easier to conquer. If we've divided ourselves from one country to 50 states, then 170 some states or independent countries, then when the enemy comes back, they can pick us off one by one, or 6 by, 8 by 4, whatever they need to, just a little batch at a time. And it'll be easy because we'll be so paranoid and distrustful of each other that we won't support each other anymore. And it'll be little nitpicky garbage. Stuff like, well, this area didn't help us at this battle during the war, so we're not going to back them up. Let them get destroyed. We'll be the ones that'll stop the enemy. Well, no, you won't. You're going to get overrun too. The only way you're going to win is by joining together. How many of you are aware of what a fasci is? Something that was adopted by the fascists in Italy. Fasci was a bundle of sticks. Basically, the theory behind it, an individual stick can be broken, but a bundle of them together, tied together, cannot be, because they have strength. Which was a fasci, became fascism for terminology-wise. Obviously not ideology-wise. But that's something you got to think about it. You're by yourself, you're easily defeated. But if you're part of a group, you're mutually supporting, you're harder to defeat. And once we're those individual nations, we'll get swept off the board. It may take 10 years, it may take 20 years, but they will go through and they will defeat us at that point. We need to stay united, we need to stay strong. And we are only strong as an individual country. One giant nation of these United States. all these little areas coming together, putting differences aside for a single purpose, and that purpose is a nation. And that's where it comes into on the deportation thing. We know that there's people that just are not going to want to be a nation. They're still wanting everything destroyed for whatever globalist reason. Well, you remove them from the equation. That's what the founding fathers did when they created the country. They got rid of the Tories. They got rid of the loyalists to the British government. And in the original video, I did tell Kaz this, and I think he did watch the original video. I did talk about there would be, war crimes trials with appropriate sentences handed out at the end, which could be incarceration, it could be expulsion, deportation, or it could be execution. That's why stuff needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis. Now, I'm sure someone will attack and once again and put in, well, you're saying that only Christians should be here, only this ideology should be here. No. In these United States, you take all these different ideologies, all these different creeds, religions, and all that, and you come together for the one goal, the one common good. And your common goal is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you can add to that preservation. Preserving this nation as its own independent entity in the world. If we allow ourselves to break down at the end of the war after everything we sacrifice, if we allow ourselves to become regionalized, balkanized, sectionized, we will easily be defeated in the next round. And in the next round, it won't be, the gloves will be off altogether at that point. It'll just be total genocide. And then they will just come through, strip everything. Do you think they're going to follow any environmental regulations at all? The reason they have that stuff is to destroy industry in the United States. It's to destroy farming. It's to destroy our production. It's to destroy our capabilities of doing anything as a country. So once that second round would be done, they're going to come through and they're just going to strip everything. Strip mines that are probably the size of an entire state. Your precious little forests that you couldn't chop down because of there being one single owl in it, they'll strip those down in a day to 2 days. They're gone. And they will not replant anything in their stead. Factory farming, imagine factory farms the size of a state. Maybe being taken care of with slave labor, but probably being taken care of with drone labor. They're a lot farther along on that stuff than you people realize. Self-driving cars that you hear about in the news and stuff that keep failing all the time, they've had that stuff around a while. I heard about a company that was experimenting with driverless trucks over 15 years ago. And they had made it fairly successful. The only limitation was you had to change the roads. There had to be certain markers and stuff in the roads for the truck to know where to turn and so forth. That was the one problem they had with the technology at that point. And nowadays, probably a safe bet that they've linked in the GPS system into those drone vehicles. So with that in consideration, do you think they really need a human slave to harvest the crops anymore? When they can just have, the combines, the planters, and all that stuff driven by drones controlled by GPS, which is shot out by a satellite, which is controlled by a computer on the other side of the world. So, We can't allow ourselves to get balkanized. There's always going to be those differences between us. There always has been, there always will be. But we can't allow those differences to tear us apart. I think I should mention this as an example on how this has been exploited in the past. How many of you are aware that the Civil War in the 1860s was actually started by Great Britain? Apparently, some of the older records of British intelligence have been declassified, stuff that's well over 100 years old. Or people have snuck out some of this information. And what they found is that British intelligence working for the Crown in the 1850s, early 1860s, were very heavily employed in the southern states of the United States because they seen a weakness there. They exploited the differences between the North and the South, and they stoked the flames. What their goal was to get the nation divided. Divide the North and the South. And then the British anticipated they would then come in and help the South beat the North. And then the British would take back their former colonies that were in the North along with a whole bunch of new territory. And then after they had done that, they had consolidated that, then they were going to double cross the Confederacy, the southern states, and then go through and conquer them also to bring them back under the control of the British Crown. We can't allow ourselves to be divided. We have to stay together. It'll be hard. It'll be damn hard, probably harder than the war itself, to put our petty jealousies aside at the end. But as we're going through this fight, we have to keep it in our mind. We're fighting for this nation as a whole. We're fighting for these United States of America. You're not just going in there fighting for, you know, your individual state, your individual county. You're going in there fighting for this nation. Just keep that in mind. Now, for all my patriot brothers and sisters out there, always remember, essayons, let us try.